such a better position than I am to do that because he has worked hard and earned credibility with a right-leaning audience. So when he starts saying things like the Republicans have very little institutional power nationally, and I think you're right, evincing that a not just a strategic choice, but a worldview shift that's so radically different from mine, I start to get worried that this isn't just about us having different strategies or different interest areas that are driving our focus, but I think a view of the world that I strongly disagree with and that I think is kind of delusional.
I think that
what she means is dumb as fucking rocks.
What?
I think she was about to say what I think is dumb as shit. I don't know, but then she was like, "Okay, I don't want to be that mean. Delusional." Okay, yeah, no, we know. We're picking up what you're putting down, Briahna. Yeah, we know that Matt's off his rocker.
Happens in a lot of, I think part of the reason independent media was created is because a lot of people felt, including me, and I think you as well, that mainstream media, corporate media, so on and so forth, institutional media, whatever you want to call it, had a lot of blind spots, didn't include a lot of voices. It didn't include the proper diversity in many different ways you could measure diversity. And so we created, independent platforms. There's Substack, people post on social, people have Rumble series, Rumble video series, so on and so forth, YouTube. And the problem, though, is what happens when you start recreating the same problem as the people you were criticizing, right? Like, if we were upset, I think a lot of people were upset at CNN, Fox, so on and so forth about the war in Iraq. So they said they weren't reporting a lot of things. We had to present a different voice. We had to dig into things. But, if Taibbi is now synonymous with what Laura Ingraham would like to read, right? If everything that he writes is something that Laura Ingraham or Sean
Ingraham, that's kind of funny.
Bro, I thought it was also funny he called him Taibbi, and I'm like, dude, is this part of your gag? Because this is kind of funny.
Yeah, that is hilarious. Yeah, but he makes a great point too, where it's like people like Matt Taibbi, they love to pretend to be independent journalists. Oh, I'm completely disconnected from the mainstream media. But then where the fuck do you see them pop up every week? Fox News. You're a Fox News talking head, one of the rotating, bobbleheads in the Fox News Rolodex, and you want to still claim to have some independent credibility as a journalist.
Oh, I'll go anywhere I'm invited, Gavin. So yeah, they don't invite me on MSM.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Andy would sign on to and endorse. Then is he just like a more online version of what those Fox evening shows are doing, right? Like,
yes.
Like even like Tucker leaving Fox, I think kind of understood this issue. I mean, Tucker recently had a pastor from Bethlehem in the West Bank, a Palestinian, and he challenged his audience, I think, severely with that. I saw so many conservatives attacking Tucker for doing that, and I'm sure Tucker knows that.
If you wake up in the morning and decide that your Christian faith requires you to support a foreign government blowing up churches and killing Christians, I think you've lost the thread.
But I think Tucker actually is pretty good at understanding that, like, if he's interested in something and thinks it's important, he's going to do a show about it, or he's going to explore it. And he probably feels more liberated having left Fox that he can do that, right? No one's going to be watching him over his shoulder, preventing him from doing that. So, I think in some way it's weird that like a former Fox News host would maybe get this more than someone who's in independent media. I think Taibbi's pretty much always been in independent media, whether he was when he was living in Russia doing Exile and when he was in Rolling Stone, now when he's independent. Yeah. I think you really need to worry. I think when you're out there doing your own thing, when you don't have a boss, you don't have an editor, you really have to worry about keeping yourself in check and not becoming the kind of person who strokes the egos of your readers, of your subscribers. I mean, look, I know what it's like.
What about that right there? Not the kind of person that strokes the egos of your subscribers, of your readers and subscribers. That's what he's doing. And that's what he's continued to do. And the fact he had to stroke the ego of Elon Musk for a long time. And he rejects the fact that he ever, he claims to reject the fact that he ever, sat on a story or didn't criticize Elon. But we know that's a lie because Matt Taibbi himself put up screenshots of text messages to Elon being like, why are you doing this to me? I never criticized you. I went out of my way not to criticize you, as I believe the wording he uses, which is obviously a confession that he knew a lot of bad shit about Elon, but he didn't want to publish it or say anything about it because then he would have stopped getting fed the Twitter files, which is exactly what happened to his counterpart, Barry Weiss, who actually did have a conscience, who actually did say, look, I have spent my whole career espousing like a very specific line of ethics. Now I think it's a fucking horrid, blended, warped sense of ethics, but she does have the free speech hard line, and she walked that walk, right? She was like, fuck you, don't do this. Now, she initially accepted it, and I would have never done that. I think that's bullshit, and I think it's a horrible idea. But imagine coming out here as a person who calls themselves an independent journalist and saying, oh, well, the thing is that I didn't want to disrupt my relationship with the richest man in the world who kept giving me scoops, and then tell me how that's any different from the guy that works for, the Atlantic and doesn't want to disrupt his relationship with the deep state intelligence officer. So he's constantly, oh, I just sat on that story about Biden. Like, oh, I just sat on the Hunter laptop story. Like, oh, I just sat on. It's no fucking different. And Matt knows it, but I think he's gaslit himself, and he's surely gaslit his audience because it's ripe on the right wing. He basically just, inherited a heavily delusional audience, right? That's what the right-wing audience gives you. As long as you just pair it back to them, they'll respond as clapping seals. They just want affirmation. They just want to see somebody that agrees with them, and then take somebody who they feel they can, showcase as like a real critical journalist who agrees with me, right? He's become a pawn in their game. Funny enough, I actually just got a notification pop up for Matt Taibbi's America This Week email that because I'm still on his Substack, I still get sent everything that he fucking publishes, and I hate read it.
I know what it's like when you write something that your reader base hates, and you just get mountains of hate, and it doesn't feel good. So I'm speaking from firsthand experience.
Yep.
Like, I would much rather just take the pulse of my readers and be.
Briahna also, is probably smiling because she knows exactly how this episode is going to be received by her own audience, which, for whatever reason. How many
views did this get? 4 days ago,
8,000 views, which actually is less than your average bad faith video. So it's clear.
Spicy too. I'm like, what the fuck, man? This should have been a numbers. This should have been a numbers clip.
It's because a lot of her audience just doesn't want to hear it. They don't want to hear Matt Taibbi getting criticized, which again, I think it's a good thing. She's pushing back on that attempted audience capture. But yeah, people are not happy for the most part. I'm so over this. The View wannabe. She's so petty. I don't know how that's anything like The View to just have a substantive conversation.
They said that my guy was not a good guy, and I he's a good guy, and there's want to watch it. That's the average mind of Matt Taibbi reader at this point. That's my guy, and I like him because he says what I think.
Yep, and doubling down on stupidity, bad faith, perfect name for this propaganda. I still feel like there's something more to this than Brie being unhappy about Matt's journalistic choices. Comes off as arrogant that somehow Matt should be in alignment with her. Such a weird focus. Take a break from your bubble. And again, Brie's not even someone who's like in a bubble. If anything, she's more willing than your average progressive to give credit to more right-leaning voices. We've even debated her on that. One time we debated her because I thought she was, giving Marjorie Taylor Greene too much credit on the whole like defund the FBI bullshit. Remember that? We went back and forth for like 30 minutes. It's not like Briahna Joy Gray is just some completely like safe space. Like, oh, I can't give credit to people who I disagree with. Not at all. If anything, she takes a lot of flack from the left for her ability to, give credit where she feels it's due.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the audience over there, it's classic, right? Like it reminds me of like when we were getting the Jimmy Dore haters in our chat or in our comment section every day. They just obfuscate. Everything's a personality. Like, oh, you don't agree with him, so you're attacking him. It's like, bro, go turn on any of the shows that you like to watch. They are constantly criticizing the people that they disagree with, right? That's how this entire format works. So you just think everybody should agree with you? Yes, that's why I made an entire politically themed show where I constantly argue my viewpoint because no fucking shit. I think it's correct. Briahna, when she's arguing, she thinks it's correct. That's because we're not ideologues. That's because we're not out here just for a quick buck. We're actually saying what we feel. We're actually looking at a situation, giving our honest take. The fact that that's so antithetical, it's so foreign to the average right-wing audience member, and also the people who tell you like, oh, you just want to call everybody that you disagree with right-wing. That's the first thing every right-winger says, right? Because they know it's so lame, they know it's so uncool, it's so pathetic. They know that it basically is going to mark you as a virgin for life. That's why they're all red-pilled now. They're like, women suck. It's like, yeah, because you can't get a date, asshole. Anyway, we can continue to go on.
Okay, everybody hates the senator. I'm gonna write something trashing the senator. Or, Taibbi writing, 2 pieces about the NPR cringe liberal CEO, right? Like, everybody was trashing her. I didn't see anybody defending her left, right, or center, right? I'm sure it was a very easy piece to write. I'm sure that his audience loved it. I'm looking at the likes. The first one got 1,499 hearts, 821 comments, which for Substack is enormous. Like, it's not like Twitter where everyone's writing a 50-word response. Like, these are substantive comments. There's a huge discussion going on about this, where of course I'm sure everybody exactly agrees. But like, this engagement farming, the clickbait stuff, like, it's just so easy, right? It feels so good to do. Everyone's telling you you're awesome. Everyone agrees with you. You're making more money. You're getting more views. I think this is what's happened to so much of independent media. So many people who operate on Substack are being hit with this right now. So many people who have YouTube shows are being hit with this right now. And the only way to counter it is just to be conscious, right? Because for someone like me to start a conversation with Taibbi, like, dude, like, don't become the thing you hate. You wrote a whole book called Hate Inc. Hate Inc. was about how MSNBC and Fox both kind of created their own universes where they just tell you how the other side's awful and evil, right? Well, Matt, are you a component of Hate Inc. now because you think the Democrats are a cult and you just hate them, and do you think they hate you? Which probably, considering the rough hearing he had on Capitol Hill, I understand why he would feel that way. Do you not want Democrats to read you at all? Are you not at all interested in what Republican governors of the House or the Supreme Court or maybe the president in less than a year, right, are doing? Right. Like, you have to consciously avoid that. And I think in the past, Taibbi,
and it's hard. I want to say that. I want to recognize that it's hard and that we all struggle with it. But I gotta say, I put out a Congo episode that I know that nobody wants to watch because I think it's important that I do a Congo episode. I put out a Haiti episode that I know nobody wants to watch. It gets 5,000 views on YouTube because I think it's important to me.
And shout out to Brie because she does do that shit. And those are my favorite episodes of Bad Faith to watch. Like, obviously the stuff that we put out on the Vanguard is the salacious shit. But what I like watching as a consumer, as a guy who is curious about politics, right? Like, I have my own fucking opinions about, the day-to-day sludge. That's what makes up our politics. But what I go to for my own personal enrichment on the internet is I'll listen to Briahna do a deep dive on Congo, or I'll listen to Ryan Grimm do, a deep dive on Haiti on, a Intercept podcast and stuff like that, because I think that is really informative. But obviously it takes an L for them. I will look at it and I'll be this one I thought was going to be a bangers clip. That's why I was, shocked it had 8,500 views. But if this was about mining in the Congo or something, I'd be well, that kind of makes a little bit more sense. But what I applaud Briahna for doing is the fact that she doesn't give up on those segments. She will do weird conversations about shit I've never heard of, and I think it's to the net benefit, but clearly it's not worthwhile. I mean, we have to bury all of the serious stories that we want to talk about into the live stream full of shit that's Matt Taibbi with a pile driver, right? Because, people don't care what we have to say about that. But it's important to us. So if it's the stadium getting built downtown, that was impacting our lives. Was it as pressing to the world as Israel-Palestine? No, but I thought that was important, and we were, impacted a rural community that Gavin and I are a part of, and so we talked about that. We prioritized that. Same with all kinds of different things. But to be honest, bro, Zaid Jilani is reeling me back in. I'm you're a smart guy. What happened to you during George Floyd? Because you made me want to pull my hair out every single fucking day and set myself on fire. But right now, I'm this is level-headed, rational, clinical analysis that I very much agree with of the trajectory of Matt Taibbi, and the point that he makes about Hate Inc. is so prescient. It's so disappointing too, because it hits it square on. He pointed out how the Substack that Matt Taibbi has created is part of an apparatus that's an ecosystem that's we're not Republicans, we're just realists kind of Republicans, right? This new age fence sitter kind of the proud to be centrist kind of politics, where everybody agrees with each other, or there's narrow room for debate and discourse, and everything else is just rejected in the way that this comment section has responded. And that's no different than the communities that, you know, people like Sean Hannity were building on Fox News, or Rush Limbaugh was building on his like talk radio nebulous. You know what I mean? It's just a bubble. It's no different than Crooked Media and the guys at Pod Save America in their bubble, right? It's not constructive. It's not good. It's just no longer tethered to overarching corporate apparatus, except it is now too. That's what's crazy, because in this, you know, people act like, oh, I'm not taking corporate money. It's like, bro, you were taking stories from the richest man in the world. Jimmy Dore, who I think is another example of this downward spiral, used to swear up and down. I watched him scold Glenn Greenwald on air when Glenn was still with The Intercept, saying, why are you working for that place? They take money from billionaires. Like, the people will give you that money. Like, you need $1 million, Glenn? We'll get you $1 million. The people would pay you $1 million to get rid of all those. They will take care of you, blah, blah, blah. And now what's Jimmy doing? Selling silver? You know, selling athletic greens, selling all kinds of bullshit to his fucking boomer ass audience to collect money. So how is that any different? You're still beholden to ads. You're still beholden to sponsors. They're still going to tell you to check yourself if they don't like what you're saying. We also know that there's a lot of billionaire silent money going around. That's for sure. So it's it's not really any different than corporate media. It just has the veneer of independent media now. It's kind of like the next generation of what Vice was. Vice was supposed to be the like Vice was the corporate version of like what's cool now. Now it's like the top level Substackers. It's all, they're getting Silicon Valley money, you know. And that's also why when you go on YouTube, everything looks professional as shit. Like people in our chat were like, even the Vanguard has a better setup than Zaid Jilani, but most people have a setup that looks like ESPN, right? Like, and those are the shows that are able to grow because people don't want DIY information, and YouTube really doesn't want the DIY thing anymore either. They want corporations just putting their content on YouTube, and it's really hard to be two dudes with an internet connection that compete with mega corporation.
The audience a little bit what they want, but the whole point of having an audience that's committed to you somewhat is that you can do your passion projects mixed in between, or things that you think are morally significant mixed up in between. But to completely abandon the stuff that brought you in this space to begin with, that defined so much of your early reporting.
I know how this is going to sound like I'm jealous or something, but like, if you're pulling in Taibbi kind of money, you can afford to lose a little bit every now and then. Like not every post has to generate like 500 new paid subscribers or something, right? Like Taibbi is one of the most successful people on that platform. And when you're one of the most successful people, I think you should be able to take more leaps of faith. You should be able to stick your neck out more than if you were someone who was just starting out, no one's heard of, and you really feel like you have to build an audience in a certain direction.
I think that's right. I want to come back to something you were just saying, though, about the Twitter files. This is another exchange that you two had. You said, I never said I object to your Twitter file stories. I object to you saying you won't write about Republicans anymore. We both know you don't want to upset your subscribers. Why lie about it? I always admired you for your honesty and integrity. Taibbi responded, after the Twitter files, Democratic politicians threatened me with jail, called me a Putin sympathizer and a Trump ally for doing my job. And now you're reprising Debbie Wasserman Schultz's act of calling me a sellout. Maybe I just genuinely think you all suck. So there we see some of this evidence that he does seem to be having a kind of reactive politics where it's about who's been beating up on him recently. And I get it. Like, I think all those people are shitty too. Democrats come after me and attack me and threaten me more than Republicans.
It's also like Matt Taibbi never praised corporate Democrats. That was never like part of his appeal to populist progressives like ourselves or Briahna. It's not like, oh, why did he all of a sudden, just start criticizing corporate Democrats when he used to defend them? No, that was never the issue. It's not like he went from being a propagandist for the Democratic Party to being a critic of it. No, he just used to criticize both the Democrats and Republicans. He would have an honest analysis of the two-party system and how each parties are corporate and captured. And yeah, maybe he would talk a little bit more about the Republicans or whatever, but now it's just a complete inverse. Now he just literally does propaganda for the right, essentially, when with some occasionally decent facts sprinkled in or some decent reports sprinkled in. But the main point is just to do propaganda and pamper the right-wing audience of his Substack.
I know, and it's so funny how confidently and with such bravado he's like, of course I've changed my politics, those people were mean to me. It's like, oh, okay, well, that way to that lets everybody know that all of your opinions are coming from the most self-centered, self-serving direction, and that just reinforces everything we've already analyzed about Matt's new direction.
for whom I'm largely invisible, but that hasn't changed who I think is the most powerful and I don't even say most powerful or most dangerous, but who is at least equally powerful and equally dangerous party in America.
Right, because those facts should exist, independent and objective to what our position is, right? If tomorrow, 1 million Democrats did a protest march outside my house saying "Down with Zaid," I would feel bad. I understand why I would feel bad, but it wouldn't change the reality that my governor is a Republican. The whole legislature stacked with Republicans, and that they have much more power than Democrats do in my state, right? So yeah, and look, the Plaskett thing. One, she doesn't actually have the power to do that, so I don't even know why she's a very strange. I think she represents the Virgin Islands, so she doesn't even
right. She's not even really, yeah.
And it was obviously an inappropriate thing she said, but no, nobody actually tried to put Matt Taibbi in jail. Okay, they can't put him in jail for reporting the Twitter files or anything. So I don't want to tell him maybe don't take it so personally, but especially if you're an irreverent independent journalist, you gotta have a little bit of a thick skin doing this work as well, right?
They fully hogtied Glenn Greenwald in his house in Brazil. I mean, people have really gone through things, but I don't want to make
people forgot about that. Holy shit!
Unless you were
No, bro, Glenn, people forget, that dude has been through some shit. He has to have full round-the-clock fucking security because of the reporting that he's done. You know what I mean? What she's referencing is, burglars came into his house and fucking tied him up and insane shit.
Yep. And also, didn't Bolsonaro, threaten to imprison him at one point based on his reporting?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway, and speaking of Glenn, who we've also debated and had criticisms of and differences of opinion, I think it's undeniable that Glenn Greenwald, again, despite many of my disagreements with him, I think he's done a much better job actually pushing back on the right-wing audience that he's accumulated over the years. When it comes to things like Israel, for example, when it comes to Ben Shapiro, Matt Taibbi will go on Ben Shapiro's show and talk about how, the left just, they really suck at comedy, that we have no Greg Gutfeld on the left. That's why everyone's, moving to the right in droves because they're just so funny. He'll go on there to do Republican propaganda and shit all over the left with boomer ass talking points like that. Glenn actually will call out, Ben Shapiro's hypocrisy, especially as it relates to free speech and the First Amendment. That's kind of Glenn's beat. So yeah, I mean, there's just an example. People love to compare Taibbi and Greenwald. I think Greenwald has been, just infinitely better, at least when it comes to free speech in Israel.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's not even up for debate. Just the other day, Glenn was tweeting about how the most blatant and glaring hypocrisy on the right wing is how they claim to, be so ardently pro free speech until people use it to stand for something that they don't agree with, which is something that they're always, crying and pissing and moaning about.
Hogtied in your house, you don't have a right to complain. But come on, have some perspective.
I mean, Glenn is a great example because Glenn did a bunch of stories that more or less exonerated Lula in Brazil, the center-left leader. And Bolsonaro and the right wing hated him, right? But then Glenn has been saying, hey, you can't censor Bolsonaro on the right. It's not good. He's been warring with this judge in Brazil who's trying to enact a lot of social media censorship against the right. That's because Glenn stuck to his principle, even though the fact that Brazilian right was literally I think someone tried to punch him on TV, a right winger tried to punch him. His life was under risk. They threatened him with prison. All this stuff happened, and yet Glenn is still sticking to his principle that he thinks censorship is wrong, and so he's standing up for the right now, even though they all hate him, right? Because he's a gay guy who was married to a progressive politician who helped free Lula and so on and so forth. So I think that. If you're doing this work, you got to avoid not only audience capture, but the second thing you're mentioning, which is resentment based or reactionary based postures, right? And also, by the way, when he said, I think he lumped me in with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Stacey Plaskett. I don't represent the Democratic Party. They don't ask me about what they say to him. Okay, so he's got to leave me out of that. I have had plenty of quarrels with Democrats.
Also, the funny thing about Matt Taibbi pearl clutching about that stupid hearing where he got scolded by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and he's trying to act like he's Julian Assange now, oh, they're trying to imprison me. They're going to put me in fucking Belmarsh because of the Twitter files or what? Yeah, bullshit. If anything, that was the biggest marketing opportunity for Matt Taibbi. He got to use that to do advertisements essentially for his Twitter files reporting. It in no way was a threat to his free speech, although obviously what a lot of those Congress people were saying was stupid.
In my life, and plenty.
I know. Right? This is the point I was trying to make on Rising too. I was like, the reason that I was paying attention to your critique in particular, because you're not that guy. You're not that lib scold. You're not that easily caricatured critic, Democratic critic, Stacey Plaskett-esque critic of Matt Taibbi, who's just mad that he says things that are inconvenient to Democrats. You, in fact, are the Matt Taibbi type who largely gets in trouble for those exact same kind of things. So that when you're making this kind of critique, I sit up and pay attention because, like Taibbi, I think you've earned your stripes as someone who's willing to have hard takes and who is not overly concerned or concerned.
She means having horribly bad takes about the police, I think is what she's referencing right there. Like humiliating, like borderline racist, like horrible takes on the police.
Whether it's a leftist cohort, a liberal cohort, or a right cohort, thinks of you.
I want to add one thing, that after I confronted Taibbi and after you confronted him on Rising, I did see that he did a couple pieces. One about Wall Street's War on Workers. It was a book that he reviewed or he talked about, he interviewed the author, and then he interviewed Chris Hedges on a similar topic. So I'm wondering if the critique kind of got to Taibbi, if he thought, yeah, maybe I am going.
And I saw a couple Palestine tweets too. They weren't like lengthy, but they're like kind of quote tweets and like, yeah, this is bad, sort of. I don't mean to diminish that. I'm just trying to characterize it.
It's like, oh yeah,
part of why.
Yeah, pretty funny stuff. I think they're spot on.